After a wild weekend, Nico Iamaleava is officially out as the quarterback of the Vols. And I think the University of Tennessee and head coach Josh Huepel made a massive statement to the rest of college football over the weekend. Hey, Lucas Panzica here from 104.5 The Zone and A to Z Sports. Okay, so the dust on this has largely settled after what was a wild 2 to 3 days for the University of Tennessee. As we know, on Thursday, we learned that Nico Iamaleava was in contract negotiations with Tennessee. What followed was a war of words, denial of the report from Nico's side of the aisle. Of course, Nico not showing up to practice on Friday, and then the news broke on Saturday morning that Josh Huepel informed the team on the day of the orange and white game in Neyland Stadium that they would be moving on from Nico Iamaleava as he reportedly asked for $4 million for the upcoming season, up from what he would have been making in a range of $2.4 million. A historic moment in this new era of college football. For the first time ever, we saw a holdout in the college game, and certainly it's the first time that we've seen a player in a contract dispute for that amount of money at a premier program and for a premier player at a premier position. Tennessee made a big statement, first of all, with head coach Josh Huepel and his comments on Saturday, both on the Vol Network before the orange and white game, and then meeting with the media in the press conference after the spring game, in which Huepel said, quote, "No one is bigger than the power T, even me." Josh Huepel is a guy that typically talks in circles, so to speak, in a press conference. He'll say a lot without saying a lot, if that makes sense. And it's all done very intentionally. But on Saturday, we saw a different Josh Huepel at the podium. We saw a direct, a confident, and unshaken Josh Huepel as this program moves forward without Nico Iamaleava, even going on to say that the moment Nico did not show up for practice on Friday morning, that was when Josh Huepel knew they would be moving on from the former five-star quarterback. He said at that point, you rip off the Band-Aid and you move on as a program. And it was really interesting seeing Josh Huepel and Tennessee players speaking with the media after the orange and white game. They looked like a galvanized group, talking about leadership and how much they love this team, specifically from tight end Miles Kitselman. I was fascinated to see what the response from Tennessee players would be if Nico was indeed on the way out, and maybe that remains to be seen with the transfer portal opening up on Wednesday. Will there be players that follow Nico to the portal? We don't know, but they certainly put on a showing of a galvanized group on Saturday that wants to come together after the Nico Iamaleava era came to an end at Tennessee. So what kind of statement did Tennessee make to the rest of college football? Well, they showed that they're not going to be held hostage by a player that you could argue underperformed last year with the sky-high expectations that were placed on him and turned around asking to be the highest paid player in all of college football. The Vols said no. They drew a line in the sand, and it's the first time that we've seen a program under this kind of spotlight do this, saying no to a player with the talent profile of Nico Iamaleava, who now will hit the portal and see if he can go get that $4 million elsewhere. I also think after seeing that on Saturday, that other programs across the country, other coaches, athletic directors are going to be calling up Josh Huepel and athletic director Danny White at Tennessee saying, thank you. Thank you for finally standing up in what has been an incredibly volatile and insane market where the player has every ounce of the power. At some point, some school needed to stand up and simply say no. Now, that's not to say that schools have refused to pay players certain amounts of NIL. That absolutely happens all the time. It's a big reason why we see as much turnover as we do in the transfer portal, but not to this extent, not this high profile of a situation, and certainly not to the point where a player is trying to exercise leverage by holding out and missing a practice, which is what Nico Iamaleava did. And we've seen widespread support, not just from the Tennessee fan base, but from across the sport of college football for Tennessee standing up and finally saying there has to be a line somewhere. And Nico Iamaleava and his people crossed that line with Tennessee. Where we go from here will be fascinating. But Tennessee has the support of a lot of people across the country finally standing up for what has been way too crazy of an NIL landscape in college football. So good for Josh Huepel and the Vols. There's a lot of work to be done. They certainly don't get better as a football team without Nico Iamaleava as their quarterback, but they made a point and they put their money where their mouth is, quite literally showing the rest of college football that they would not be held hostage by one player in this era.